She walked into that boardroom with a folder under one arm and a cup of gas station coffee in her other hand, and the man at the head of the table didn't even look up. That's how it started. Not with a fight, not with a confrontation, just a man who didn't look up. Her name was Zephyr Halston, 29 years old. Former Army Ranger, one of the first women to complete the program without a modified standard. 2 tours in Syria. A commendation she kept folded in the back of a drawer because she didn't know what to do with paper that tried to summarize 18 months of things she'd rather not remember. She'd been out for 2 years. Civilian life, she told her mother, was its own kind of combat, just slower, and with worse coffee. The firm was called Mercer Vane Strategic Consulting. It occupied the 14th and 15th floors of a glass building in downtown Chicago that reflected clouds all day and looked like it was always about to rain, even when it wasn't. Zephyr had taken the job because a veterans employment counselor named Greta had told her the private sector valued discipline, analytical thinking, and the ability to function under pressure. Greta had been right about 2 out of 3. What the private sector actually valued, Zephyr discovered in her first week, was golf and the right last name. And the ability to laugh at jokes that weren't funny. The man who didn't look up was named Clifton Vane, co-founder, 61 years old, Harvard MBA, class of '87. His name was on the building directory in gold letters, which he had apparently insisted on personally. His assistant had let this slip once during a coffee run, the way assistants always let things slip. Not as gossip, but as warning. Vane ran the senior analyst division, which was where Zephyr had landed after 3 rounds of interviews that she'd been told were highly competitive. She believed them. She was one of 2 black analysts on the floor. The other was a man named Jerome, who'd been there 4 years and still got asked by visiting clients if he was the catering staff. Jerome had told her this on her second day, flatly, the way you tell someone about a pothole on a road they're about to drive, not to scare them, just so they'd know it was there. Vane's particular style of management was what Zephyr's mother would have called high-handed. What Zephyr called it wasn't something she said out loud at work. He had a habit of assigning the messiest, most structurally broken projects to the analysts he'd already decided weren't going anywhere. The logic, as best as Zephyr could reconstruct it, was something like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Give someone an impossible task, watch them fail, confirm what you already believed. It was the kind of system that worked beautifully if no one ever actually looked at what was happening inside it. She'd been at Mercer Vane for 11 months when Vane called her into his office and slid a folder across his desk without preamble. "Halston," he said. He still didn't look up. He was signing something. "I need a full restructuring analysis on the Kellerman account. Margins, projected losses, liability exposure, a reorg plan the client can actually take to their board." She looked at the folder. It was thick, maybe 200 pages of financial records, internal memos, a decade of budget reports. She'd heard about the Kellerman account. Everyone had. It was a mid-sized manufacturing company out of Detroit that had been hemorrhaging money for 6 years, in ways that 3 previous analysts at the firm hadn't been able to fully explain. The account had burned through 2 senior consultants before landing in what Jerome called the graveyard, the queue of projects that got handed to people Vane wanted to fail quietly. "Timeline?" she asked. 3 weeks, Vane said. He was still signing things. "It's not a priority project. Just get me something I can use to tell the client we tried." She picked up the folder. "I'll have it done in 2. He looked up then, just briefly. A flicker of something. Not respect, not yet. More like mild annoyance at a variable that wasn't behaving. 3 weeks is fine, he said. She did it in 9 days. The first 3 days she spent doing what nobody else had apparently done. She read everything. Not summaries, everything. Every memo, every budget line, every footnote. She had a habit from her ranger days of starting any operation with a full terrain analysis before she let herself form a single conclusion. Her CO had called it pathological patience. She'd called it not dying. By day 4, she'd found it, not buried deep. It was almost insultingly visible once you knew what to look for. A structural accounting error that had been propagated across every year-end report since 2019, compounding quietly like a splinter working its way toward bone. The company wasn't failing because of market conditions or labor costs or any of the dozen explanations that had been offered in the previous reports. It was failing because nobody had caught that the amortization schedule on their core equipment leases had been entered incorrectly in the baseline model, and every projection built on top of it had been wrong. 6 years of wrong decisions made from the foundation of one uncorrected error. She confirmed it. Then she confirmed it again. Then she called Jerome at 8 in the evening and walked him through it because she'd learned in the Army that when you find something nobody else found, you make sure you're not just seeing what you want to see. Jerome was quiet for a long moment after she finished. "You're sure?" he asked. "I've run it 4 ways," she said. Another pause. "Zeph," he said carefully. "That analysis has been sitting there for 3 years, with our names on the door. That's not going to feel good for certain people. I know." Vane specifically signed off on the 2022 summary report. The one that said the company's issues were structural market. "I know. So you understand what you're walking in there with." She looked at the spreadsheet on her screen. The correction was so clean it almost looked like art. 1 wrong number. 6 years of downstream consequences. A neat, demonstrable chain of cause and effect that even a first-year analyst could follow once someone laid it out for them. "I understand exactly what I'm walking in with," she said. She spent the next 5 days building the full restructuring plan. Not just the error identification, a complete forward-looking proposal. Corrected projections, a phased reorg, risk mitigation timelines. The kind of document that was meant to actually help a company, not to cover the firm's exposure. She worked until 2 in the morning most nights. The gas station down the block from her apartment started having her coffee ready when she walked in because she was there at the same time every night. On day 9, she printed the report, put it in a clean folder, and walked it to Vane's assistant. He called her into his office 40 minutes later. She sat across from him while he read. Or didn't read. He was flipping, scanning, the way people do when they're looking for a reason to dismiss something before they've understood it. Then he slowed down. She watched him find the core error analysis. She watched him read it twice. The room was very quiet. Outside, hide his window, the glass building across the street was reflecting a flat gray sky, and it did look like rain. "Where did you get this?" he asked. His voice was careful in a way it hadn't been before. "The Kellerman files. The ones in the folder you gave me. Our previous analysts reviewed those files." "Yes, sir." He looked at her. For the first time since she'd started at Mercer Vane, Clifton Vane looked at her like she was a person sitting in a chair in his office rather than a variable he'd already accounted for. "The 2022 summary," he said. "I signed off on it. I saw that. It contradicts your findings. It does." He set the folder down on his desk, carefully, the way you set something down when you're thinking about what it means. "You're saying we gave that client 6 years of bad guidance." "I'm saying the model was broken before we touched it," she said. "The original error predates the firm's involvement, but the last 3 reports didn't catch it." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a distinction that matters legally." "Yes, sir. I know. I included a liability exposure section. Page 47. He found page 47. He read it. She watched his jaw shift slightly in a way that wasn't quite discomfort but was related to it, the expression of a man recalculating something. "Why 2 weeks ahead of schedule?" he asked. "You said you needed something you could use," she said. "I gave you something that actually works." He looked at her again. Outside it had started to rain, finally, genuinely, water running down the glass in long diagonal lines. "I'll need to verify this," he said. "Of course," she said. I documented every step. The methodology's in the appendix. The verification took 3 days. Vane brought in an outside actuary, someone he trusted, someone not affiliated with the firm's existing work. The actuary's report came back on a Tuesday morning. Zephyr was at her desk when Jerome appeared in her peripheral vision. He leaned against the edge of her cubicle wall and didn't say anything for a moment. The actuary confirmed it, he said. She nodded. All of it. He paused. Vane called the Kellerman CEO this morning. Personal call. 45 minutes. She kept her eyes on her screen. That's good for the client. It's good for the firm, too. If they handle it right, they can reframe the whole thing. Proactive discovery, course correction, demonstrate integrity. It could actually save the relationship. That's what I was hoping. Jerome looked at her for a moment. He had the expression of someone who wanted to say something larger than what he was about to say. You know this changes things. Maybe, she said. Not maybe. He pushed off the wall. Vane's been asking people about you all morning. Quietly. The way he asks when he's deciding something. She thought about that. About the folder on his desk. About the 9 days of 2 a.m., coffee and spreadsheets. About the moment he'd finally looked up. He should have looked up sooner, she said. Jerome smiled at that, a small, specific kind of smile. Yeah, he said, he should have. The meeting Vane called 2 days later was not small. It was in the main conference room on the 15th floor. The one with the long table and the view that made you feel like the whole city was a slide being presented to you. There were 12 people in the room, senior partners, account leads, 2 members of the firm's legal team, and the Kellerman CEO, a heavy-set man named Arthur Gaines, who'd flown in from Detroit that morning with an expression that suggested he was prepared to be angry. Zephyr sat near the end of the table. Vane had placed her there. She hadn't been told what the meeting was, exactly, only that her presence was required and that she should bring her full documentation. Vane opened. He was good at this part, she'd give him that. The presentation of information that was uncomfortable in a way that made it feel like competence rather than damage control. He walked the room through the history of the Kellerman account. He acknowledged the errors in the previous reports. He explained the distinction between the originating error and the firm's subsequent analysis failures with the precision of a man who had spent 2 days practicing that distinction in his head. Then he said, "The full error was identified and documented by one of our analysts." He said her name. Arthur Gaines turned and looked at her, not with skepticism, with the focused attention of a man who wanted to understand. "How long did this take you?" he asked. 9 days, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Our previous analysis teams had that account for the better part of a year between them. "I know," she said. "I read their work. What did you do differently?" She thought about how to answer that, about the terrain analysis, about reading everything before forming a conclusion, about her CO's voice in her head saying that the problem with smart people is they fall in love with their first hypothesis. "I didn't start with an answer," she said. "I started with the data." Gaines looked at her for another moment. Then he looked at Vane. Something passed between them that Zephyr wasn't entirely sure how to read. Some adult calculus about money and trust and what gets said next. "This report," Gaines said, holding up his copy. "This is real. This is actually fixable. With the right implementation plan," Vane said, "which is also in the document. I want her on the reorg," Gaines said. He said it simply, the way you say something that seems obvious to you, not as support, as lead. The room shifted, not dramatically. A few exchanged glances. Someone's pen stopped moving. Vane said, "We can discuss the team structure." "I'm not asking about the team structure," Gaines said. "She found it. She built the plan. I want her leading it." There's a particular quality to a room when something that everyone has been pretending isn't happening finally becomes the thing that is happening. Zephyr had felt it before, in briefing rooms, in situations where the map finally matched the terrain and everyone had to stop navigating by memory. The room on the 15th floor had that quality right now. Quiet, recalibrating. Vane looked at her, the same look as before, the variable that wasn't behaving. Only now the calculation behind it was different. "Can you commit to the Kellerman account as lead?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He nodded. Once. Slowly, the way a man nods when he is making peace with something rather than agreeing with it. She called her mother that night from the parking garage because she needed cold air. And she needed to be away from the building for a minute. Her mother's name was Sandra, and she answered on the second ring the way she always did, which Zephyr had long since understood was Sandra's way of communicating that she had been half expecting the call. "How was today?" Sandra asked. "Good," Zephyr said. "Good like okay, or good like something happened." Zephyr leaned against her car. The parking garage smelled like concrete and rain. Above her, through the gap in the structure, she could see a small rectangle of sky, dark, Chicago dark, the orange-gray color the sky turned at night when the city was lit up underneath it. "Good like something happened," she said. Sandra was quiet for a moment. "Tell me," she told her. Not all of it. Not Vane's expression. Not Jerome's small smile. Not Gaines saying, "I want her on the reorg," in a room full of people who'd assumed she wasn't. She told her the clean version. She'd found something no one else had found. She'd built a plan. Someone had listened. Sandra was quiet for a long moment after she finished. "Baby," she said, "how many people were in that room?" 12. "And you sat at the end of that table and told 12 people what was wrong and how to fix it. Something like that." "That's not something like that," Sandra said. "That's exactly that." Zephyr looked at the rectangle of sky. "I just read the file," she said. "That's all I did." "Zephyr Halston," her mother said, in the particular tone that Zephyr had been subject to since approximately age 7, and which had never once failed to stop her mid-sentence. "Don't you dare make what you did small." She didn't say anything to that. "You hear me? I hear you." 3 months later, the Kellerman restructuring was complete. 6 years of bad math, corrected. A company that had been 12 to 18 months from an involuntary bankruptcy filing stabilized. A workforce of 432 people in Detroit who didn't know Zephyr Halston's name but were still employed partly because she'd spent 9 days reading everything. Gaines sent a formal commendation to the firm. Vane read it at a staff meeting. He read her name. He read it correctly, which she noted, because he'd been mispronouncing it for 11 months. Jerome caught her eye across the room and gave her a look that said, "Told you." She gave him a look back that said, "I know." After the meeting, Vane stopped her in the hallway. Not at his desk, not with his back half turned, not while signing something else. He stopped, and he faced her, and for once the conversation had his full attention. "The Kellerman account changed some things here," he said. "I know," she said. "There's a senior analyst position opening in Q1. The selection process starts in January." She looked at him. "I'd like to be considered." "You will be," he said. He paused, the kind of pause that had weight in it. "I should have looked at your file more carefully when you came in." She thought about what to say to that, about 11 months of gas station coffee, about the folder he'd slid across the desk like a task meant to stay in a drawer, about the first time he hadn't looked up. "You're looking now," she said. He nodded, that same heavy nod, and then he walked away. She stood in the hallway for a moment. Outside the window at the end of the corridor, the glass building across the street was catching the afternoon sun for once. No clouds, no reflected gray, just light coming off it in clean, flat lines. She picked up her phone and texted Jerome. Hallway he appeared 40 seconds later, she told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then, senior analyst, not yet. Q1, but considered. "Considered," she said. Jerome looked at her with the expression of someone who understood the full weight of a word like considered in a building like this one, on a floor like this one, from a man like Vane. He understood it because he'd been here 4 years waiting to be considered for things that had been handed to other people without the word even coming up. "You earned it," he said. We'll see, she said. No, he said, gently, firmly. The way her mother had said, don't make what you did small. You earned it. Say it right. She looked at him. Outside, light was still coming off the building across the street, flat and clear and without drama, just the simple fact of something that was true. I earned it, she said, and the hallway was quiet, and the building held its shape, and somewhere in Detroit 432 people went home that night without knowing her name, and none of that made what she had done any smaller than it was.